this is the biggest panel we have through the day, and we have a multinational representation, if I can say that, which represents the Indo-Pacific in some ways. We have a Australian general seconded to the Indo-PACOM who is representing the US here. We have the Australian High Commissioner. We have the ambassador for the EU based in Delhi. And we have Shimon Fima, who's the UK's head of strategy for Indo-Pacific based in London. And of course our own DGDI General Rana. So it's a diverse and perhaps the most eclectic panel that we managed to assemble finally. So let me start at the other end of the Indo-Pacific, if I may, General Scott Winter. Since you are based in Hawaii, and that is a vast expanse, the Pacific actually, comes all the way from that side and then comes near the Indo-Pacific, towards the Indian Ocean. How does the Indo-PACOM command gone? Yeah. Okay. Look at the challenges in this vast expanse, because of course your definition of Indo-Pacific probably differs from others, but let's hear from you. What are the main two challenges if you have to really identify?
Thank you very much, and can I say thank you for the opportunity to represent here today. And Admiral Tripathi, I find myself in violent agreement to your descriptions today. So just to reinforce a couple of points first before I specifically look at those challenges. The first one is, as was pointed out, as an Australian Army officer, as the Deputy Commanding General for US Army Pacific, I have confused a number of people here today. But I would say that that is testament to previous Commanding Generals in Hawaii, their vision for changing the face of Indo-PACOM and US Army Pacific to reflect the importance and centrality of partnerships. And not just partnerships, but true friendships based on shared values, mutual respect and trust. And those things are at the centre of what I see the challenge that we need to seek to achieve. But just to reinforce what Admiral Tripathi did say, if the new norm is characterised by failures of deterrence, as we see in the conflicts elsewhere in the world and at sea, an increase in malign or bullying behaviours, and an enhanced requirement for a collective response to those behaviours, then the new norm can't be acceptable to any of us. And to that end, what we are doing, therefore, at US Army Pacific comes under four headings. Now, we are organising, we are building, we are generating, and we are applying joint and land power in order to avoid conflict. Because in that new normal, the one thing the world and this region cannot have is another war, particularly not in this region, devastating for all of us. So we are organising differently. We're rebalancing the way in which we look at fires, manoeuvre and protection. And that needs to be done hand in glove with industry partners like we have here today in new forms of partnership. And I think that that's an area that we really need to tap into further. We are building joint interior lines because, as you indicated, it's a vast expanse. And as we know as military professionals, interior lines and positional advantage is key. And again, we can only achieve that in the Indo-Pacific with partnerships. We're generating land forces differently by exercising forward in the region. And again, we do that with industry because we need to experiment forward with new technologies. We can't wait for the old-fashioned processes which were quite rightly criticised by some of our industry partners in earlier panels today. And finally, we're applying our power in a different way, and that is collectively. Now, it's a different form of collective. This is not a region where we're seeking to build a NATO or anything of that sort, because we respect the sovereignty of those different nations. The way in which we get after that challenge is build trust, multinational exercising, multinational projects and industrial collaborations to build that new form of mutual respect and trust to offset those potential conflicts. Because as I said, everything we do at US Army Pacific is in order to avoid conflict. Thank you.
Right. I think that's a good start. And as Admiral Tripathi has already enunciated, elaborated, that India is also looking at the Indo-Pacific as a collaborative space going forward. But since DGDI Lieutenant General Rana is here, let me ask in your view, and obviously it's a view that will be shared in the government itself, what is India's Indo-Pacific strategy really? If you can define it in a brief manner.
First, thank you, Nitin, for giving me the opportunity here. Now, as in the keynote address also, the Chief of Naval Staff has brought out very amply clearly that if you have to use one word for our Indo-Pacific strategy, it is Sagar.
Just take it a little closer.
Yeah. So, one word for Indo-Pacific strategy is Sagar. That is the under the broad umbrella under which everything lies. That is security and growth for all. And that shows our intent, actually. The Prime Minister Modi also initiated this strategy overall in 2015. And under that, we had the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, which our Prime Minister himself actually announced in East Asia Summit in 2019. And very interestingly, it is a non-treaty organization, and with 7 verticals. Now we see as a voluntarily lot of countries Indo-Pacific have joined these verticals, and they're working together. And if we go down further, as the Chief of Naval Staff also brought out, we have different constructs in the region. And we have the Navy Symposium, which was started in 2008. It works together to put us together. We have different kind of constructs which are here. But we have also mini construct, or we say mini treaties like the BIMSTEC. So that is how we look at BIMSTEC, which we put every together. Then we have the 7 trilaterals arrangements like US, Japan, India, similarly in the Indo-Pacific. So we are working through these trilateral arrangements, and we have the Colombo Security Conclave. 5 countries now part of that conclave. So we look at the whole strategy, everything revolves around this. And we differ slightly with our friends, like we generally don't believe in the allies and alliances. We believe in strategic partnership.
That's right.
So if we see with all our countries here, the friends, we have different levels of strategic partnership. And through that partnership, we work very well in the region. And as you rightly brought out earlier, that the Indo-Pacific, everybody has different definitions, like what India sees as Indo-Pacific, from the eastern coast of Africa to the shore of America. So that has to be seen now with all the allies, how we look, what our interest lies, we have to see in our region as well. So the focus has to be overall. That's what I like to say.
That's right. So let me move a little westward. Ambassador Delphine, if I am getting the pronunciation right. Europe, of course, is not part of, conventionally the part of Indo-Pacific really. But there's a lot of interest in Europe, in the individual countries like Germany, France. Of course, France is a resident Indian ocean power, so it can be legitimately that. What is Europe's outlook towards Indo-Pacific really, if you can elaborate a little bit?
Thank you for having me. I hope that the quantity and eclecticism of this panel will be matched by quality. Maybe start by dispelling this view that Indo-Pacific is remote from Europe and Europe is remote from Indo-Pacific. Actually, Europe, the EU, has made its pivot to Indo-Pacific long time ago. If you look at our economic equities in terms of trade, in terms of FDI, in terms of ODA, the EU has always been the number 1, number 2, or number 3 partner of many of the countries here. So what has changed is indeed what General Tripathi described as the contestation and conflict and these dynamics that are upsetting what has been the glue of this region, cooperation, mostly economic one. So for the EU, actually, we made our pivot not only economically, but strategically. And this strategic pivot is not just the strategic, the Indo-Pacific strategy that we adopted in 2021. I happen to be one of the co-drafters of that document. But just to remind that we are looking at it as important as what is happening in Europe. Some people said, oh, because of the war of aggression of Russia, we are now just geared towards Europe only and forget about the Indo-Pacific. I just would like people to remind that something happened even before the war of aggression.
Ukraine war, yeah.
Something which is called the no-limit friendship between Russia and China, which means that there was something at play, something ongoing in terms of the interconnectedness of the strategic theaters of Europe and the Indo-Pacific already in the making, even before that war. And if anything, the war of aggression of Russia has increased this interconnectedness. So for us, it's not like we have to choose between the Indo-Pacific and Europe, it's both. The both are interconnected. And when we look at the dynamics that have been mentioned, it's around through 3 Ps. Is the prosperity agenda. We really want to continue to invest in shared prosperity because this region is the growth engine of the world economy. Right. No one can afford of having this growth engine stalled. So we have partnerships in connectivity, in digital and everything. We have FTA with most of the partners. We are negotiating with Australia, with India, with Indonesia, but we have a series of FTAs we have concluded. We will continue on this, on global gateway, connectivities, that's it. The second is about peace and security, where I think the EU is not what you call the usual hardcore, hard power player, but what we are a smart enabler in security. We have different ways of engaging with the Indo-Pacific information sharing system, EURIS. There is an equivalent in India, I think the NISHAR, if I'm correct. And we have actually, this system is used by 90 agencies of the Indo-Pacific and 45 states. And I think this is, maritime domain awareness is a key factor. Indo-Pacific is mostly a maritime space. So I think we need really to invest into that. We have among our 2 Navy operations, the EU, Atalanta and Aspides, happen to be in the Indian Ocean. And for this, we are also collaborating with partners, whether our allies, traditional allies, UK, US, or India, as now we are exchanges directly with in India on those aspects. So the element of peace is multi-layered. Claiming again the full respect of the rule of law, UNCLOS. I think this is something that we will be adamant on it. The second is prepare defense, assess the new threats. It was mentioned, undersea uncrewed vehicles, autonomous surface vehicles, cyber attack, the security of sea cables, and all this. These are new threats. We have to adapt to that. And I think the EU is fully on that page through different instruments that we have. And the third P is about partnerships. And I think that was mentioned. We hosted in February this year the 3rd Indo-Pacific Forum. We had 70 countries present, 45 at ministerial level. And again, it speaks for how much the EU is invested in Indo-Pacific. And the risk, and maybe this is the note of caution I would put into this. The real risk for us, I think, is a fragmented approach to the different dynamics that is happening. In order to capture what is happening, you really need a comprehensive approach, strategic approach to Indo-Pacific. Some may argue that you need to maybe have specific zooming on the Pacific as opposed to Indian Ocean. Fair enough, we can discuss that. But I think, for me, the risk of fragmentation is what can be instrumentalized by those who have a different agenda. And I think this is the greatest challenge that we may face.
Absolutely. I think on that note, I should turn to High Commissioner Philip Green. As a country which is at the confluence of Pacific and Indian Ocean, you obviously look east and west both. And that's where I think the entire focus is right now between these 2 oceans. So as a country which is in the middle of the 2 oceans there, what are your, I would say, objectives in doing cooperation with the Quad countries, of course, but also going further because there is also your cooperation with France, maybe, and EU, as you mentioned. So just give us an idea to our viewers and to our audience here. How does Australia look at Indo-Pacific? Because I just want to get everybody's view on that.
Thanks, Nitin. Well, first of all, it's pretty stark, isn't it? We say repeatedly in public that Australia's strategic circumstances are worse than they have been at any time since the Second World War, and that they are deteriorating. And that requires action. So what are we doing? So the first thing is an overwhelming focus on our near abroad, on the Indo-Pacific. We've just released a new defence strategy, and for the first time, we have changed from characterising our military as being a balanced force, that is to say, one can operate in our near region and one that can be involved in expeditionary activities far abroad. We've removed that and we talk instead about a focused force. And that means focused on our region. Military engagement is important, and it is important in seeking to establish the strategic equilibrium in our region. We need to demonstrate that there are enough of us who are prepared to stand up for that the cost of breaking the peace is too great. And that's why Australia is deeply engaged in AUKUS and delivering nuclear-powered submarines. That's why we are doubling the size of our surface combatant fleet. That's why we are rising the proportion of our defence spend to be 2.4% of GDP. So we're doing a lot in the defence space, but the point is that that's not enough. This is a struggle which engages all arms of state power. Diplomacy. We have to send a message to our region that makes the countries in our region want us to be the leading players. It's not enough for us to be militarily strong. We have to have a powerful message. And we have to put inputs into the region, whether that is in infrastructure or maritime domain awareness or development assistance, to demonstrate to the countries of the region that we care about their futures and we care about their sovereignty. And the third thing is the focus of this seminar, partnership. It is beyond the capacity of any one power to maintain the strategic equilibrium that we want. That needs to be a shared endeavour. In that, characteristically, we are involved with our great ally, the United States, and our long friend and economic partner, Japan. But in seeking that partnership, what has changed most dramatically is our engagement with India. And, if I have one message for this audience, it's that the way in which Australia has deepened its engagement with India over the past 5 years is without precedent. I mean, we've built long and big partnerships with the UK, with the United States, with others, but with India we are doing this at a much faster rate. I'm conscious, and Lieutenant General said it, that India has different sorts of partnerships, and India will make its own choices as to what sort of partnership it wants to have a country like us. But I guess the point I would make is that Australia is ready for a deeper partnership with India. Australia is ready for a deeper partnership with India, and we think that would be a powerful vector for creating the strategic equilibrium that we all want.
Thank you. I think that gives me a cue to ask Shimon who's from the UK Ministry of Defence, Shimon Fima. Like Australia is making this declaration, commitment that it needs deeper partnership with India, what would be UK's focus in the Indo-Pacific? First of all, what's that strategy? And where does India figure in that Indo-Pacific strategy of the UK?
Thank you, Nitin. And firstly, thank you to the Chief of the Naval Staff, I think, that for the very inspiring words. Let me start by reflecting on where the UK is and why the Indo-Pacific is important. And it isn't important just now. If you look at some of our key reflections when it comes to allies and partnerships, they are focused on the Indo-Pacific. I'd say of note, we almost started by reflecting on the Indo-Pacific, almost before we came to some of our strategic challenges closer to home. AUKUS is a critical part of our focus, and that is, the focus of that is about maintaining the strategic balance from a military capability perspective in the Indo-Pacific. And that is about leveling up. The term that I use when it comes to AUKUS is about leveling up capability, ensuring that all nations that can operate in the Indo-Pacific have the best capability to hold the deterrent, to hold the adversary at risk. And that's important, because when I hear our own Lord Robertson, former NATO Secretary General, who's undertaking and leading the UK Strategic Defence Review, his one word to summarize what is our intent through that review is deterrence. Because a reflection of where the world is today is that we have lost deterrent. We lost deterrence as reflected in the Ukraine-Russian conflict. We were complacent. We were complacent, and perhaps we thought it wouldn't happen. We also were complacent around the Gulf and the Red Sea, and indeed the Black Sea as we go a bit further out. That complacency means that those who wished to attack thought there would be no response. And without the ability to respond, and without importantly, the willingness to respond, then we will have no deterrence. So from a UK perspective, the world is far smaller than we thought it was. The conflicts are very close to home from a UK perspective in the Euro-Atlantic, but we realize that the Gulf isn't that much further away. And when we look at the challenges of our adversary, we would be naive to assume that the Indo-Pacific is far away too. And therefore ensuring that those in the region, and indeed collectively as allies and partners, we all have the optimum capability is why we are focused on AUKUS. It's not just AUKUS. When we talk about our GCAP, our sixth generation future fighter, that is very much a focus on the Indo-Pacific. That relationship with Japan is around ensuring that those who are closer to the region have the best and optimum capability. And that is why, from a UK perspective, the UK-India relationship is critical and important. Of course, the relationship is old and is deep, always has had its challenges too. But actually there's a natural affinity. And from a UK perspective, it's about ensuring that how can we work more closely together? Because ultimately, it is a small world, and ensuring that India and the UK, and indeed our allies and partners, have the capability that they need, gives us all the security that we need.
Yeah, I think you summed it up very well. But let me start this way again. Ambassador, what is Europe's view of India in the current flux, or shall I call it world disorder? Does Europe see India as, I wouldn't say unreliable, but India is something that is trying to balance between Russia and the West? How does Europe see that?
I mean, to put it simply, I think India is probably the fastest growing of any strategic partnership that the EU has with key players. If we look where we were 5 years ago and where we are, next year our leaders will meet. There will be a EU-India summit hosted here in India. And when we will take stock of all the progress made and we will chart the roadmap for the future, you will see a great deal of ambition and commonality of views in strategic terms. it's not just that it's a partnership that has grown organically. I think there is a clear realization that there is a lot of commonality, strategically speaking, certainly in the Indian Ocean. I mean, about a third of the EU trade goes through the Indian Ocean. So I think the reliability and security of the supply chain, which applies to also to India, this is a common objective we have. And that's the reason why we have 2 naval operations there. That's the reason why we have also a positive project called IMEC with India, which is a strong and strategic endeavor. This is a decade-long project. It's a structuring project for the world economy. And I think we are fully part in that. We are also what we would call 2 balancing powers. I mean, we don't have any aggressive agenda. I think we can, in this environment of polarization and competitions, while we stick very true to our strategic interest and our values, our partnerships, I think we need to bring an element of moderation. And I think this is also an element that where the EU and India have a lot of common vision for the region, but beyond that, more globally. Let me maybe zoom in on the topic of the Indo-Pacific and where EU and India can work together. I think as we cannot propose a hard power offer like Australia could do to India for sure. But what strikes in the last years is how the security and defense pillar of our cooperation has grown. And as I said, there are many ways of investing into this. This is the soft security, below threshold threats, cyber, hybrid. We will expand dialogue on security of AI, on space. So there is a lot of an agenda which is developing on that. More importantly, we will also, and I think we have a strategic dialogue on Indo-Pacific with the US, with Japan, and I can say today, the intention of both sides is to create a strategic dialogue on Indo-Pacific between the EU and India. This is going to take place soon. So this is another way of showing and saying that India and EU have a lot of to do together in this part of the world.
Right. So I think you've looking at non-military aspects much more in the Indo-Pacific from the EU angle, really. But as a general in the Indo-PACOM command, really, I think Indo-PACOM's the name change itself was an indication in the US and amongst the allies that this region is now important and it needs not just soft power or not just economic and other aspects, but also needs hard power. In that respect, you spoke in your first response about joint exercises, about interoperability. How is that now, at which level do you think? Because I think the US has the maximum number of exercises, joint exercises with India, really.
Yeah, we really value the growing exercise program that we have across the joint force with India to enormous mutual benefit. I would start by quoting a former US president who did say, speak softly but carry a big stick. So just to reinforce absolutely all elements of statecraft, but we owe it to our political leadership to provide them options. And we provide them options by hard power and by having a network of trusted friends and partners. And there's no better way of doing that than through the series of joint and army-to-army exercises that we're currently doing, because that builds interoperability at every level. So tomorrow I'll get on a plane, we'll go up to Rajasthan, I'll see Indian and Australian and American troops on the ground there, conducting interoperability exercises, long-range fires, infantry minor tactics, it doesn't matter, because it builds trust. And really that's what interoperability is, particularly at the people-to-people level. We talk about 3 levels of interoperability, and again, this is where industry has that part to play. First, it's the people-to-people level. That's that trust. The second is procedural, so we understand each other's procedures, and eventually you get to the technical, and that's where our devices can talk to each other. And that's always a bit of a stretch goal, but again, industry's got an important part to play there. But we do that through the exercise. We don't just get together and fly the flags. We actually have hard power outcomes in terms of what interoperability outcomes we seek to achieve. We set mutually supportive goals with due respect for the sovereignty and the different sensitivities that we have, but that exercise program and the way in which it has grown and accelerated, as the High Commissioner mentioned, amongst many of our nations in recent years, is a point I think that we should all take some pride in.
That's right. Actually, there's that military aspect and there are the other aspects of the relationship in the Indo-Pacific. High Commissioner Green, when we had done a chat on camera some months ago, we of course spoke about the centrality of defense relationship between India and Australia, and which you also just mentioned. But apart from that, if you have to identify two key pillars for India, Australia, maybe US and Japan relationship under the Quad umbrella, what would they be? What should these countries be doing apart from the military and strategic relationship?
The word strategic is used in different ways. So we don't think of the Quad as being a defense construct,
Sure.
but we think it can have a strategic impact. If we are able to demonstrate to the countries of the region that we are providing them with a capacity to understand their maritime domains better, that has a strategic impact. So for me, further movement on maritime domain awareness is absolutely crucial. The other thing is that we need to help have our region linked up in ways that give a network of trading and human engagement that isn't centered on one country. And so infrastructure, which helps interaction between all of us and our neighbourhood, is crucially important. So for me, I would say two things: strategic engagement, such as on maritime domain awareness and infrastructure. But since I've got the microphone, so one other thing. It's very important that Admiral Tripathi gave the keynote address this afternoon, because this is a maritime domain.
Absolutely. I was just going to come to that.
It's a maritime domain. Yeah. And for us, working more closely in that maritime domain is vitally important, and it's natural for a seaborne country like Australia with a neighbour that is just on the other side of the Indian Ocean. So in particular, focus on the Northeast Indian Ocean with its crucial strategic engagement and approaches to the South China Sea. Finding ways of engaging, learning from each other in the way in which we deal with our island neighbours. So for us, our maritime abroad is all about small island states.
Yes.
India's got a few of those as well. It's a different neighbourhood, but there are ways in which we can learn from our different situations. So for me, the maritime character of what we are doing is crucially important.
Quickly, Shimon, before I come to as a concluding remarks from General Rana, to you, Shimon, if we have to look at two priorities that the UK must have in a non-military sphere in the Indo-Pacific, what they would be?
So one of the more recent initiatives that was announced is really around technology and security. When we look at the resilience of what we have at the moment, yes, we can do well technology, but we know that the resilience in that space is relatively weak and quite vulnerable. Noting that India is clearly a technology powerhouse, and the software engineering capability is something that I know our two national security advisors focus on a lot. And that is not about the defense element, but that is around the general security element. Because if we cannot secure from a cyber perspective from a telecoms perspective, some of those securities, then we won't succeed. So for me, there are two elements. It is the broader security elements, and I know there are deep relationships between the two NSAs, and I think that leads into the other aspect, security of passage. It's not a military aspect, but if we don't, the prosperity impact on both our nations is what we need to protect.
That's right. So, General Rana, the final word to you. You spoke about mini, bi and trilateral arrangements India has with different countries in the Indo-Pacific. But more specifically, in your view, does India also look at ASEAN countries as something that is important for the Indo-Pacific and of course to India? Because looking east, acting east has been India's now policy. From looking east to acting east has now become the buzzword and of course main focus. So in terms of, since you are the Defense Intelligence Agency Chief, what kind of shared information domain that you operate in as far as the ASEAN countries and looking east is concerned?
Okay, ASEAN country is central to our foreign policy. And as you rightly brought out, we are now Act East and looking at ASEAN very closely. And ASEAN also welcome India's participation. That's well known. So when you look at ASEAN countries, the only matter of concern which we see here, that when we talk about, without naming, the states which are operating in this area, there are states which respect the consensually based, rule-based order, and the state which defy that.
That's
so
right.
the state which defying that is making inroads, and I think we are not able to make much checks. And ASEAN, especially if you see, this is a study by the Singapore-based Asia ASEAN think tank, and this is a survey which they have done. They realize that China occupies a major, place in ASEAN economically and strategically. It's above US and other Western countries.
Sure.
So at the same time, you see what's happening in South China Sea and in our neighborhood. The rule-based orders is being defied, and we see how they are actually successful in a way in their gray zone warfare. We see in what is happening in South China Sea, Vietnam, good cooperation, but they are carrying out, Vietnam has good cooperation with China, but they have moved their baseline in Gulf of Tonkin.
Right.
A new situation is being created at the same time. In ASEAN also, they have been able to deal bilaterally and make out things which are in their benefit.
Right.
So there is a need to have a cohesive approach, as it was brought out also in ASEAN countries, and ASEAN is in a regional architecture. We are part of it. We are part of ARF. We are part of ADM Plus. We are very much involved with all the things in ASEAN. Other thing which I would like to bring out, as Australian High Commissioner has also brought out, the maritime domain. When we talk about Indo-Pacific, maritime domain is important, but it's not only maritime domain for us. We have to see, when we say sovereignty of a country, it is our land borders and maritime domain. We can't bifurcate that.
You can't,
so we
yeah.
can't say, okay, maritime domain, what's happening, or our land borders, we are not concerned. We have to be concerned about that.
Absolutely.
And I would like others to be sensitive about it, what is happening on the other, and regionally in our neighborhood, how the situation is getting destabilized. By the actors, we need to focus on these issues, and I think there is a concentrated effort required there. And we talk about checking against a country, but we need to see, as India, concerned about the collusivity. So when we see the threat coming from these countries, we have to see how they are engaged as proxies in our neighborhood. And we need to be concerned about it, and in our defense cooperation and in our engagement by the other countries, I think that should be kept in mind. That's what I would like to say.
Surely.
Thank you.
Clearly, what comes out here is that collaboration, cooperation, planning together against people who are trying to, or nations that are trying to destabilize the Indo-Pacific remains the central focus of countries in the Indo-Pacific. The definition may differ from country to country, but generally we all agree on what the definition, what the geographical expanse is. I think on that note, let me thank my panelists here for an excellent insight, and to Admiral Tripathi for having set the tone for what is the destabilizing, or what is the contestation in Indo-Pacific, and how Indian Navy looks at it. Maritime domain awareness is key. There are other aspects to the cooperation between different countries. I think a lot of work needs to be done, but I think that's why these kind of conferences come together, and our core audience here are defense attaches from different countries. They range from Africa to Japan, and from South America to Europe. All of them are here. And thank you very much, all my fellow panelists. A round of applause for them and to Admiral Tripathi. Over to you.